Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Stokastic NBA Strategy Show. We're sponsored by PrizePicks today, and as you guys come in, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and very good day to be subscribed to the YouTube channel if you like me. If you don't like me, this might not be a great day for the YouTube channel, but I'm going to be on a lot of content today, starting with the NBA Strategy Show. Later on in the day, I'll be on NBA Live Before Lock. Also, I'm recording an MMA video today. I'm doing an NBA PrizePicks video. I'm doing an NBA betting video. So I'm going to be putting a lot of content out. So like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel so you know when all that stuff is going live. Adam, how are you doing? How was your night?
It wasn't great. I played the wrong Pacers. I think my night would have been it was Nemhard was going to kill me anyway. But I lost my Chris Duarte once George Hill was starting because it was like, well, what the hell is this rotation going to look like now? So played too much Mathurin, played too much Nemhard, didn't play enough Duarte. It was had too much of Harden and Embiid, not enough of Kyrie and Luka on the other side. Yeah, frustrating slate, but on to the next one.
Yeah, we had Luka and Kyrie each scored over 40 points. And then I think for me, I was almost break even to the dollar yesterday, which is one of my big goals in DFS, is to have a slate where I make the exact same amount to the penny that I put in that I get back. So more, I root for that on slates. If it's like a neutral slate, it gives me rooting interest. I'm always trying to pull to get the exact same amount. But I was within like $5 of it yesterday, so pretty close. Ended up being nothing real significant happened in any way for me yesterday. And also, I wasn't playing a ton of volume. I was hanging out with my dad. I wasn't on NBA Live Before Lock, so my dad and I went out to dinner, and then I was updating lineups from my phone. So also, it wasn't like I was playing a mass amount of volume yesterday. But we had a lot of news that came out throughout the slate, in particular when you mentioned that Pacers weird starting lineup. So it's a good thing that I didn't play a bunch of lineups because I would have not been able to update all of the stuff as it went along. But like I said, on to the next one. We do have a 10-game slate to talk about today, starting with the Orlando Magic against the Charlotte Hornets. And starting on the Orlando Magic side of the game, there are no real massive injuries. We do have Jonathan Isaac remaining out for this team. And I mean, this guy just can't stay on the basketball court, but they've got plenty of players to replace him. The Magic run a pretty deep rotation. It's a 10-game slate, and considering the size of the slate, Adam, is there anything that really stands out to you about Orlando when it is a team that's running deep rotations?
Cole Anthony at 4,100 is pulling a massive amount of ownership.
Yeah, 35%. The most popular player on DraftKings right now. A little weird to me.
Yeah, I don't totally understand why. I mean, he played 33 minutes last game. Like, I get that. But he doesn't have to play 33 minutes again. So that's kind of interesting. Like at 4,100, I think he does all for value, but I do think we see that ownership number come down a bit, probably. The optimal percentage probably also comes down a bit. What do we have him projected for right now in terms of minutes?
And by the way, he did play 27 minutes the game before that one.
Yeah, I mean, we have him at 26 minutes, 26 DraftKings points. It is a good matchup. Like, I get it. He's a good value, but we're not that far removed from Cole Anthony, not playing tons of minutes. So I think he is still risky. And so I'm kind of surprised by that ownership. But, first guy off the bench in both halves last game, like you said, good, solid playing time in 2 games in a row. I think he's a good value. I'm just a little taken aback by the ownership. But other than that, it's kind of just a team where I think there's a lot of good but not great plays. Wendell Carter Jr., Markelle Fultz, Paolo Banchero, all reasonably priced, all in a good matchup, all getting double-digit ownership. I think that all looks good. Jalen Suggs at 3,800, I think is a kind of interesting lower-owned version of Cole Anthony. He played 24.5 minutes last game. He's a little bit cheaper. He's getting 1/5 or 1/6 the ownership right now. So that's kind of interesting. But I think any of the starters plus Cole Anthony plus Jalen Suggs are solid plays.
Yeah, and to your point before, like we got 33 minutes out of him last game. He also played some garbage time last game, which had an impact. 27 minutes the game before. Before that, though, was 17 minutes, 18 minutes. Before that, he had missed some time due to injury. And before that, he was playing like 20-ish minutes per game. So, yeah, we saw the minutes the last couple of games, but hard to know exactly what the playing time is going to look like today. So if this ownership holds, I'm going to say that he's looking pretty overowned. But with that in mind, this is a 10-game slate. It's early in the morning. There's going to be more players that get ruled out. My expectation is that as more news comes out, more value opens up. I think that ownership on Cole Anthony is going to drop, but we shall see what ends up
This kind of reminds me of, I don't remember if I think the show might have been with Lofty. I don't know. It doesn't matter. But the other day we had the Pistons with like Amadou Diallo on the early show pulling like 35% ownership. And it was just like, I think he's okay, but I have no idea why this ownership's there. And then by the time we got to the deeper dive, it was like normal. So like, I think Cole Anthony is fine. I don't think he's the best play on the slate or anything.
Yeah. And once again, it's one of those things. Check out all our content later on in the day, and we'll have some updates on the ownership and also what other plays become available. Because I would be very surprised if that ownership holds later on in the day. Anything else you want to talk about from Orlando?
No, just good matchup. Lots of guys you can get to. Orlando typically kind of just looks the same every slate. And it's just like, oh, these guys are like normally priced. And then whether or not you're going to get to them or not comes down to the matchup and the slate. This is a matchup where I expect to be getting to plenty of Orlando.
It is a good matchup against the Charlotte Hornets, who also no LaMelo Ball. He's out for the season. We know about that broken ankle. And then we've got PJ Washington being listed as doubtful. So now we've got the Charlotte Hornets team, which they're still throwing the corpse of Gordon Hayward out there, played big minutes, and he's been pretty good in the second half of the season. Terry Rozier is somebody else who sees a pretty big leap in usage with LaMelo Ball off the court. Rozier was super frustrating a couple of days ago because I played a bunch of him, and he got off to a pretty decent start. And then in the fourth quarter of that game, where we saw Terry Rozier, he had a lot of opportunities to score. His usage was fairly high in that game, and he could just not make a shot down the stretch of that game against the Phoenix Suns, to the point where I'm fairly sure, if I remember correctly, he'd missed 3 free throws in a row at the end of the game. He'd also missed 2 layups. And there's a thing where I'm like, just hit a couple of shots, gets like 40 plus fantasy points at a 7,200 price tag. And he just wasn't able to do it. But still, going forward in a decent matchup against Orlando, Terry Rozier is the guy that stands out the most to me. But who are you seeing that still is benefiting from the absence of LaMelo Ball and PJ Washington likely not playing?
Yeah, I'm there with you. Rozier looks good. He's played 8 games so far this year where LaMelo's been out and Gordon Hayward's been in. In those 8 games, 1.08 DraftKings points per minute, 38 minutes per game, 28.8% usage rate. Like you said, he was disappointing down the stretch last game. For me personally, for whatever reason on that slate, ended up not having a lot of him, so I enjoyed it. But the opportunities were there. Like you said, he played 38 minutes. He is still a solid option here. Price tag came up a little bit to 7,700, but no real issues there. We got Kelly Oubre in the starting lineup last game in place of LaMelo. He played 38 minutes. He had been limited previously, and so when they moved him into the starting lineup, the assumption was that he was going to play more minutes. I certainly did not expect 38, but that makes you feel pretty good about Kelly Oubre as well. Overall this season, 1 fantasy point per minute for Oubre, and that's not accounting for whether or not LaMelo Ball's on the floor. Oubre is just a pretty good fantasy producer. He's not afraid to chuck up shots. He's played 929 minutes without LaMelo, still at a fantasy point per minute, 26.8% usage rate, not a lot in the way of peripherals. So, you are talking about a pretty scoring dependent player, but shooting guard, small forward, 6,600, playing a bunch of minutes. Him and Rozier really stand out. Hayward at 65, I think is fine. You haven't seen any huge bump for Hayward this year without LaMelo. He's at 0.93 DraftKings points per minute without him on the floor, 23.3% usage rate. In the 8 games he's played with Rozier and without LaMelo, Hayward's at 0.88 DraftKings points per minute. But as you said, he has been playing a bit better as the season's gone on. Started out really slowly. The thing that's really interesting to me is I think Oubre is a better play than Gordon Hayward, but we have Oubre projected for 29% ownership. We have Hayward projected for 5. That's just one of those spots where if you laid me 6-1 odds, I'm taking Gordon Hayward every single time. That doesn't mean you need to play Hayward more than Oubre in DFS, but it does mean that it's a spot that you can, if you need to be different in a lineup, you can certainly look to make that pivot. Mark Williams at 6,300, not pulling much ownership because it's a 10-game slate and he's a center, but you're typically getting 28 to 30 minutes from him. 1.15 DraftKings points per minute in the 8 games he has started so far this year. Dennis Smith Jr., 5,100 off the bench, still played 26 minutes last game. Certainly a risky play, but he closed both halves. You're probably getting 26 to 28 minutes from him. So this game certainly falls into that trend we've been seeing recently where good basketball games aren't very appealing for DFS and shitty basketball games are. There's a lot to like here. I think Oubre and Rozier are the priorities, but I have no issues getting to some Williams, getting some Hayward, maybe mixing in some Dennis Smith Jr. as well.
Yeah, and I agree with you also. I mean, it's just one of those spots. The team hasn't quite been priced correctly for the absence of LaMelo Ball. So to your point about shitty basketball games, yeah, this is a game that would have been shitty anyway. It's even shittier because LaMelo's out, which makes it even better for fantasy purposes.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's where we're at with that one. Now, the next game has the highest total on the entire slate, currently at 241.5 points. Portland Trailblazers on the road against the Atlanta Hawks. And I was really curious to see what was going to happen with Damian Lillard's usage with Anthony Simons back. And I guess we're just never going to find out because Simons played like 6 minutes and then he got hurt again. So now we've got the same scenario. Damian Lillard has no Anthony Simons. There is Jeremy Grant back in the mix, but by and large part, Portland plays a rotation with so many low usage guys right now that Damian Lillard just gets to take all the shots that he wants because the players around him, it's Cam Reddish, Drew Eubanks, Matisse Thybulle, Shaedon Sharpe, Trendon Watford. These are just low usage guys with no offensive game whatsoever. And the entire offense just becomes Damian Lillard. He's really expensive now, but considering that Anthony Simons is once again hurt after his brief return, how does Dame look as a payoff option to you?
Yeah, that Simons thing was really frustrating. I have two DraftKings best ball teams in the third round. One of them has Simons. So they said, that Simons is coming back earlier than expected. I'm like, oh, that gives it a chance. And then now he's out for the rest of the time probably. But this price tag on Lillard, I think, is perfectly fine without Anthony Simons, because for the reasons you were saying, you have Jeremy Grant, who at least has some sort of, offensive presence. But other than that, nobody on this team is an offensive player. And so you get rates from Damian Lillard that are comparable to like what Luka was doing before Kyrie Irving came. You're talking about 40+% usage and a near 40% assist percentage when Simons and Nurkic aren't on the floor for Lillard. So I think, there's certainly some sticker shock just because, you're not used to getting Damian Lillard near 12K, but I think it's fully deserved. I have no problems getting him here. It's a 10-game slate, so I'm sure we're going to end up with plenty of value that's going to make it easy to get there. I really like getting to Dame.
By the way, I got 21 teams through to the third round of the DraftKings Best Ball. And
you got 21 through to the third round?
Yeah, I have 21 teams left right now. I have Tyrese Halliburton on almost all of them. And so he misses yesterday's game. I've run so good with injuries all year. And then we finally get to this round and everybody falls apart and gets hurt.
How many teams did you get 150 in?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I forgot that I didn't play. I only played like 42, I think. I got like 25, 24 through to the second round, but then I only got 2 to the third round. But I forgot I didn't play 150. So I was like, how the hell did you get 21?
Yeah. So one of the main reasons also, and then I know we got 10 NBA games to talk about, but I went pretty concentrated with the players I drafted. I had Lauri Markkanen on like 130 of my 150 teams. His ADP was past 100 to open. He was my favorite player by far. So like that's something that really carried a lot of my teams. I drafted a lot of Halliburton, which was really good until like right now when he got hurt yesterday. So that's like the main reason. But who else are you state banking on? Do you know?
Oh, no, I don't really remember what I have.
All right, fair enough.
They just look like mediocre teams that hopefully get hot.
Yeah, I get that. Anything else from Portland you want to talk about? We've got all the usage going to Dame, and then the rest of the guys, Jeremy Grant's a usage player, but the rest of the guys are just not good fantasy producers by and large.
Yeah, I mean, Jeremy Grant is still interesting to me because in theory, he should be able to put up some big games here without Simons and without Nurkic because he's very clearly the second option. The problem is that the second option here is really still like the third option because Dame is options number 1 and 2. But there's nothing other than Dame stopping Jeremy Grant from having a high, high ceiling here. But he is getting the ownership he deserves. I don't think he's going under-owned or anything like that. Beyond that, you're just kind of looking at value and, hoping to get lucky. Trendon Watford's another one that right now is in that Cole Anthony range where like, I think he's fine, but there's no way he's going to be 17% owned, and he certainly shouldn't be. You got a ton of minutes from him last game. He played 30 minutes, but that's a game where Drew Eubanks was in foul trouble early. Then, Watford did close over him down the stretch, but you're getting 48 minutes split between Eubanks and Watford. One of them certainly can end up being a good value with Eubanks at 4,600, Watford at 3,700, but neither one's going to stand out, assuming that they're pretty much splitting 48 minutes. Matisse Thybulle, Cam Reddish, the minutes should be there, but neither one is a very appealing point per minute guy. So to me, Dame is the clear priority. Jeremy Grant is fine. And then, if you just end up with a little bit of Watford or Eubanks or Thybulle or Reddish, that's all fine. But the only thing I really love is Dame.
So let's talk about the other side of the game. We're also super high total. The Hawks are expected to put up a ton of points in this game, 241.5 total. Not only is it that large of a total, the Hawks are favored by 7. So they're expected to be the highest scoring team on the slate by a really wide margin. But even with that said, it's hard for me to find any individual players that stick out on this team. Trae Young and DeJounte Murray, the fit hasn't really been ideal from a fantasy standpoint this year. And pretty frequently, we've seen players in and out of the lineup for the Hawks, and everybody's healthy right now. John Collins is healthy. DeAndre Hunter's healthy. Clint Capella's healthy and not on a minutes restriction. Young and Murray are both good to go. So with the Hawks expected to score all of these points, how are you going to be handling them in tournaments when nobody really looks spectacular from a points per dollar perspective?
So Trae Young, like always, is going to be a good play. And, it's a good matchup. Obviously, 9,500. He looks fine. He's pulling 16% ownership. Cool. No problems with that. The spot that's really, really, really interesting to me is Clint Capella at 5,600. All season long, we've seen, the 48-minute split between Capella and Onyeka Okongwu, where, typically you're going to call it 27, 28 minutes for Capella. You're going to call it, 20, 21 for Okongwu. The thing that's really interesting to me, and this certainly could just be a coincidence, but game one of Quinn Snyder, 35.2 minutes for Clint Capella. So at 5,600, the way I'm thinking about this is if this does just turn back into what it was and you're getting 27, 28 minutes from Capella, he'd be a good play anyway at 5,600. He's a good point per minute guy. That's a cheap price tag. He can get it done in 28 minutes. If Quinn Snyder is going to play Clint Capella like a true starting center, this guy is $2,000 underpriced. And so I'm really interested in getting him here at 5,600.
Yeah, I think that definitely makes some sense. And the other, that is something also, is we did see a coaching change and, pretty fresh. Quinn Snyder just got signed by this team. And, there'd been turmoil with the coaching staff the entire year, whether Nate McMillan, there was at one point rumors that he was going to retire at the midway point of the season. So who knows how much of an impact that has had on this team. And we should consider that some of these coaching change, or this coaching change to Quinn Snyder, is going to alter the rotation. Is there anything else you've noticed about the rotation that could change with Schneider coaching?
That was the big thing. Like just, kind of looking at the, playing time and at the rotations, you got 34 minutes from Trae Young. That's normal-ish. DeJounte Murray played 35. That's normal. DeAndre Hunter played 33. Nothing, too weird there. John Collins played 26. That's what we'd been seeing. Sadiq Bey played 27 off the bench. He closed over Collins. Like you could certainly get some games where Collins plays 30 and Bey plays 23, but that's pretty much the situation we had been in. Bogdanovich didn't play a ton. The only thing that seemed like actually interesting to me was that Quinn Snyder, at least in game one, treated Clint Capella like a true starting center.
I actually really like that a lot. It was something that I hadn't really taken too much notice of. And I'm probably going to bet some like the alternate lines on Clint Capella as well. I haven't looked at what they are, but I'm sure you could get him for like 15 plus rebounds or something, like pretty good plus odds. So that's something I'm going to really consider. And I think it's a really good shout out by you. Anything else you want to talk about from the Hawks?
One other, doesn't really matter, but one other note I just wanted to point it out since Quinn Snyder's back. And you did mention that the Hawks are 7-point favorites. Quinn Snyder had a very strong tendency when he was in Utah of during home games, even in blowouts, he would play his guys pretty deep into the fourth quarter. So that's something where, like, not that I would be heavily adjusting anything for a 7-point spread anyway, but it's just a Quinn Snyder note to keep in mind. If he does keep doing this like he did in Utah, he was kind of a blowout proof coach as well.
Yeah, good to know. And coaching, we don't usually see him at this point in the season, but we did with the Atlanta Hawks. So keep note of that, everybody. Also, we're sponsored by PrizePicks today. If you guys haven't signed up at PrizePicks yet, do it by using the link we have below in the description box, because not only is that going to get you up to $100 bonus on your first deposit at PrizePicks, it's also going to get you 1 free month of Stokastic Plus Platinum. So with our NBA tools, it's a lot of good reasons to sign up at PrizePicks. Number one, it's going to help you make money at PrizePicks, but also it's going to help you make money at DFS, because we've got our player projections, our ownership projections, the boom bust tool, the lineup generator that we've been featuring more frequently on shows now. If you guys want access to all of that for free, just sign up at PrizePicks using our link. It's a really, really cheap way to get access to everything we have on the paywall over at Stokastic.com. And also NBA season going on, but also MLB season starting up later this month. And we're going to have all of our usual tools for baseball as well. So good time to get involved. Sign up at PrizePicks using our link. Next game, the Brooklyn Nets against the Boston Celtics. I don't know what to make of Brooklyn right now. It's a team that sometimes I look at them, it's like, boy, this is a team with a deep roster, a lot of good players. They're competing against teams you wouldn't think they should compete about. And then they play like the Chicago Bulls and they lose by 50 points. And the rotations are inconsistent. The performance of the team has been inconsistent. It's a tough matchup against the Celtics. This is not a team I'm all that interested in for today, Adam. Do you see it differently?
No, sorry. I was trying to log into the DraftKings Sportsbook so I could start betting Clint Capella overs. So we are on Brooklyn and Boston. And I see it about the same way. Like Mikal Bridges has taken on a bigger role for Brooklyn. The upside's certainly there for him. He's playing big minutes. This is just a team that's really appealing to me in tournaments because Nick Claxton at 6,400, he's just always going to be a high upside center that looks very similar to other high upside centers. Nothing special there. But certainly whenever you get him at low ownership, it's, an appealing ceiling to get to. But then you talk about the Cameron Johnson, Spencer Dinwiddie, Mikal Bridges trio. And I think you're just going to sort of see Bridges probably be the number one guy most often, but I think you're going to see it kind of vary game by game. And it creates a situation where the medium projection is never going to be that appealing relative to salary for these guys because you're going to have enough dud performances mixed in, but the good games are going to just destroy the price point. And so that makes it really interesting in tournaments. None of them are underpriced, really. Cameron Johnson's the easiest to get to at 5,500. If you wanted to argue anyone was underpriced, it would probably be him. But you still get that massive ceiling from guys like Mikal Bridges. We haven't seen it really yet from Dinwiddie, but I do think it's there. So in tournaments, it is kind of an appealing team, but this is also a pretty difficult matchup against Boston on a 10-game slate. It's not one that I really plan on prioritizing much of anything. I do think Cameron Johnson, small forward, power forward, 5,500 is probably the easiest guy to get to from Brooklyn.
So now let's talk about the other side of the game when it comes to the Boston Celtics. And Boston also pretty healthy right now. Derek White got banged up last game, but he is going to be playing. And now we've got Jaylen Brown. He's back and healthy. Jason Tatum, obviously, he's been healthy pretty much all year. Marcus Smart also back in the picture. He had missed some time. It's a matchup against the Nets where I don't think the Nets are good right now, but they have so many good individual defenders. I wouldn't be surprised if going forward, this ends up being a pretty good defense. But also just with Boston being as expensive they are and everybody healthy, I just don't think this is a good game on the whole.
Yeah, I don't think it's particularly appealing. It goes without saying, if you get to Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum, those guys are both fine. Robert Williams is another low-owned, high-upside center that you can throw into the mix. He's 5,100, played 31 minutes. Again, last game, you've seen that 28 to 31-minute playing time from him be pretty consistent. So no issues getting there. But outside of just, low-owned tournament plays, I don't think there's anything I'm prioritizing from Boston.
So let's move on to the next game. And another one that, at least on one side of the game, I think is going to be somewhat shitty for fantasy purposes. The Knicks against the Heat. And of course, to do the strategy show. So Jimmy Butler's question. We'll be talking about that on the Heat side of the game in a second. But first from the Knicks, the total is extremely low in this game, 215.5. This is the lowest total of the day. The next lowest total is 223 in the Suns Phoenix game. So the pace of this game is expected to be really, really slow. I know the Knicks play concentrated rotations and we're used to them being in slower paced games, but also Mitchell Robinson is back now after he was out for a little bit. I don't think this is a great team to target here either in the New York Knicks just because of the pace of play.
Same. This game sucks. Like Julius Randle's really good. Jalen Brunson's really good. Obviously, if you want to get to those guys at no ownership in a tournament lineup here or there, they can still have big games despite the pace. But there's going to be so many good plays on a 10-game slate that you can't just, say you're prioritizing every single good player. And that's going to push Randle and Brunson down the list. Mitchell Robinson, same boat as Robert Williams. He's cheap at 5,100. He can give you around 30 minutes. He's got plenty of block upside that increases his volatility, but there's also 100 good centers on this slate. I got nothing that, I'm actively looking to get to.
So let's talk about the Heat on the other side. And I hope Jimmy Butler just plays because then I could just feel pretty good about saying like, hey, not really going to get to a whole bunch from this game because Jimmy Butler, obviously, if he sits, it would have a big impact on the Heat. But even if he plays, I've had issues getting to him lately because he's not playing a ton of minutes and his usage is down this year. So I know he has some of these outlier games like against the Sixers 2 games ago where he made like 80% of his shots from the field. But his follow-up game against the Sixers, he plays 27 minutes. He scores 25 fantasy points. And we've kind of seen Butler capped around 32 minutes as of late. So, and also, like I said, the usage down a little bit as well. For the season, Jimmy Butler is a 25.4% usage rate. So down from the 27% he had last year. If Jimmy Butler ends up sitting, though, what would stand out to you from the Heat and what would be a really low-paced game?
Yeah, I mean, if Butler is out, you get increased production from Tyler Hero. You get increased production from Bam Adebayo. You would get more minutes from some combination of Caleb Martin, Max Strus, Victor Oladipo. It would make all of those guys start to look like decent plays. I still don't think anybody would be a true priority, but if Butler is in, I'm basically not interested in any of it. So it would at least move those guys to like secondary options instead of just random pieces.
Yeah, so like I said, I hope Butler plays, and then I just don't have to worry about this game. Because are you like me? If Butler plays, like this is a game you'd feel pretty good about writing off both sides for the most part.
Yeah, this would just be very similar to the Knicks side, where it's like, can Tyler Hero or Bam or Butler have a good game? Sure, but it probably won't be in my lineup if they do.
So let's just move on to the next one then. And it is the Phoenix Suns against the Chicago Bulls. So from the Sun side of the game, this is another team where I'm not going to have all that much interest in, but the reason for the Suns is different. The Suns perspective is because they've Kevin Durant now. He's playing on somewhat of a minutes restriction. Like I think we're probably going to be seeing, what's it, 28 minutes or something like that from Kevin Durant in the foreseeable future. He's going to be closing games, but even when he's on the court, he's not playing enough where he individually has upside, but he's going to take shots away from Devin Booker. He's going to take shots away from DeAndre Ayton. So I think this is another team that's really hard to target just because Kevin Durant's being integrated into, and he's obviously a really high usage guy.
Yeah, this is really tricky. So I'm with you. Like, I agree completely. Kevin Durant being there, he's 10-4. He's on a minutes limit, so you can't really play him. And he is obviously a high usage guy that's going to cut into Devin Booker. It should take production away from Paul Booker Ayton. The thing that does make this tricky is this offense is impossible to defend when Kevin Durant's on the floor. So I'm curious to see what exactly the fantasy point per minute trade-off ends up being for Devin Booker. We know we can expect less shot volume, but if he's going to be getting more open looks, you could conceivably get a situation where he's still a very good point per minute guy. We saw him have a massive game in 33 minutes last game out. Obviously, that was against Charlotte, and it's one game, so you don't want to draw any, massive, any huge conclusions from that. But it is conceivable that you get kind of Devin Booker coming out in the wash where he's getting less shots, but he's getting a better quality of shot. And so he still ends up being really good at 9K. It's interesting in tournaments. But, again, it's a big slate. There is the Kevin Durant risk, but it does make it kind of tricky to talk about because I don't think it's quite as simple as just saying like Kevin Durant's here, Devin Booker is not going to get shots because Devin Booker is going to get some really good shots.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I think we should see an uptick in efficiency for him going forward. If I'm not mistaken, would Booker and Durant combined shoot like 25 of 41 in the first game together? And like you said, yeah, it's a game against the Charlotte Hornets, but still, this is an NBA team. They still have to make the shots. And it's not like these guys were taking nothing but layups. It was just wide open perimeter shots, and they're able to knock them down. And like you said, I just don't know how anybody is going to defend them. For me personally, though, it's just going to be hard to project any of them well. Right. But they're so low owned that if you guys are building out lineups and you got to some of Booker here or there, or maybe Chris Paul ends up, seeing an uptick in assist rate, I think that would be all reasonable. But I know for the majority of you guys who are watching our hand building 1-3 lineups, like there's nobody from Phoenix I would consider in that scenario.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of similar to the Dallas with Luka and Kyrie. Like you expect to see lower rates from Booker, but you still just have a massive ceiling because, like we saw yesterday, when Kyrie and Luka are playing together, it's just impossible to defend, and they're getting better looks than normal. You're going to see that same thing here with Booker and with Durant. It's really difficult to quantify at this point since we only have one game of it. But it's just a situation where I still think the ceiling for Devin Booker is massive, but the median projection probably does come down a bit from where it was.
So let's talk about the Chicago Bulls side of the game, and a team that's always been a little bit difficult to figure out where the usage is going for them this year between Vooch, between Levine, and between DeRozan. One thing that is kind of nice, though, is that nobody else is taking shots really right now. It's kind of just those three guys that are responsible for all of the usage. So between Vooch, Levine, DeRozan, do any of them stand out to you as being good plays in what should be a fairly difficult matchup against the Suns?
Yeah, nothing that stands out in the context of the slate. I think they're all fine. If you get the Vooch, DeRozan, Levine, they're always fine. That's, it's been that way all season long, but they are pretty much correctly priced. You have some really cheap value with Alex Caruso at 3,200 and Kobe White at 3,400. It's a 10-game slate, so you probably won't need to go that route, but it's there if you need to throw darts in like a 150 lineup tournament. But really, I don't think this is a very appealing team at all.
Yeah, it's a team that in neutral matchups sometimes could be hard to get to, and this is going to be another hard one. And I'm not exactly sure what the Suns defense is going to look like going forward. It stands to reason that without Mikal Bridges and without Cam Johnson, it would be a little bit worse, but I still think it's going to be a well above average defense. So no real interest in the Bulls for me. Any of the role players stand out to you? Because that's another one where none of them look like they should project well.
No, I mean, you got really cheap price tags on White, Caruso, Drummond is the backup center. Beverly's cheap at 3,700 coming off probably the best game he will ever play for the rest of his career. But yeah, nothing that stands out.
Yeah, Beverly was looking all kinds of washed as of late. And the thing also, when this happens, nothing more tilting. But of course, we're on live before lock. And I can't remember who the chalk point guard was on that Patrick Beverly slate. There was some There was somebody who was like an outstanding value play, and we got
Chris
a
Dunn.
super chat on.
Was it the Chris Dunn slate?
It was, except I didn't like Chris Dunn. There was somebody else I liked instead. But either way, we got a super chat, and somebody asked us Patrick Beverly or somebody who's just a very obvious value play. And it was like, well, obviously not Patrick Beverly because he's Patrick Beverly. And then Patrick Beverly goes out and plays the best game he's played in like 6 years. Yeah. And it was very clear I was on the wrong side of it like 3 minutes into the game. We were like 3 minutes into the game. He had like 4 points, 4 rebounds, 2 steals and a block or something like that. It's like, oh, great. Here's the 3% owned guy who just crushes this slate.
Yeah, the dude had 30 fantasy points at halftime. That's like 2 games worth of production from Patrick Beverly.
Yeah, what is his points per minute production this year? Like
it's like 0.6.
Yeah. And there we go. And that's how that's how it comes back to the average there is he just puts up all his fantasy points for like the entire month in one game. So nothing else from Chicago to talk about?
No.
So let's move on to a more interesting team and a more interesting game, the Utah Jazz on the road against the Oklahoma City Thunder. From the Utah Jazz standpoint, Chris Dunn looks like he's going to be popular, particularly over on FanDuel. I didn't like him the other day. I'm not going to like him this slate either. And I understand that a lot of people who played Chris Dunn were not upset with the result. He wasn't great. He wasn't bad the other day. But keep in mind in that game as well, Agbaji got hurt. He started over Chris Dunn. Chris Dunn was on pace to play like 16 minutes in that game and not do anything. So I'm hoping that people played Chris Dunn. They still see he's relatively cheap and they want to roster him again. He is projected for 17% ownership on DraftKings. FanDuel, though, Chris Dunn is projected for 45% ownership. That is insane to me. I actually might be more apt to play on FanDuel instead of DraftKings today, just if that ownership holds, because I do not think Chris Dunn is a good option at 45% ownership on FanDuel.
No, neither do I. The other thing here is let's not pretend like Chris Dunn is like a great point per minute guy either. For his career, he's 0.91 DraftKings points per minute. I'm not so like the Agbaji injury certainly made it more likely Dunn would close that game. I think you could have seen Dunn close anyway. So like, I'm not sure that he was only going to play, those 16 minutes, but in the first half, we didn't see him play a single minute next to Talen Horton-Tucker. We hadn't seen him play a single minute next to Horton-Tucker in previous games. Then he did close with no Agbaji. But I'm with you. Like, even if he plays 24 minutes at 4,300, I'm not that interested, and he could certainly play less, if they just close with somebody else. So I don't totally get the 17% ownership at 4,300 on DraftKings. I certainly don't get why half the field would be playing him on FanDuel. At 4,500, it's not even like he's minimum salary or anything. I don't get it. The guy's not a very good point per minute guy anyway. His minutes are up in the air. I'm good. If Chris Dunn beats me, he beats me.
Yeah, so he had that one game where he went off. He scored, 40 fantasy points in 23 minutes. If I'm not mistaken, nobody played him really on that slate anyway. But look at the other years that we've seen Chris Dunn as an NBA player. He's never been a great points per minute fantasy producer. He's always been below a fantasy point per minute. And I mean, we don't even have that much data on him because you know who doesn't think Chris Dunn is good?
Everybody every executive,
every NBA team that's had the ability to sign Chris Dunn for free and has opted not to because they don't think he's worthwhile. Right. He played in 2021, 2022. He played 14 games for the Portland Trailblazers. In 2020, 2021, he played 4 games with the Atlanta Hawks. I know there were some injuries in there as well, but once again, anybody could have signed him this year. And then the year before with the Bulls, he played 51 games. This is the most recent big sample size we have of Chris Dunn is 2019, 2020. He played 25 minutes per game and scored 21 fantasy points per night. It's at best, based on his previous career averages, I think his current price point is fair, but I tend to think he's probably even maybe a little bit overpriced on FanDuel, and the field is playing him like crazy.
And the thing with Chris Dunn, and it goes back to, why he's not a great point per minute guy. He's not a good offensive player. He's a defensive guy and pretty much always has been. So you have that, working against them from a fantasy standpoint, but also thinking about it rotationally for Utah. And this goes back to what I'd said about, he hadn't shared the floor with Horton-Tucker in previous games. He didn't in the first half last game. It's tough to play them together because you have really reduced spacing. Horton-Tucker is shooting 26.5% from 3 this year. Chris Dunn can't shoot. Agbaji's a 39.5% three-point shooter this year. Agbaji makes more sense alongside one of these guys. So it's just, you have reasons that Utah wouldn't want them together. You have a player in Chris Dunn who isn't a very good point per minute guy playing questionable minutes at ownership. This would be an entirely different conversation if Chris Dunn were like 2% owned. Then it would be like, Sure, he can play 24 and have a good game, but if the field's going to be there, like especially on a 10-game slate, there's so much other stuff you can play.
Yeah, and then the rest of this team, as we look at it right now, THT is projected for 15% ownership. Markkanen's interesting because he's way different looking on DraftKings compared to FanDuel. DraftKings, he's 9,600, which I think is more or less a fair price point. FanDuel at 8,600. I love getting to Markkanen at 8,600 price point on FanDuel. 96 on DK, like I said, just more or less fair. But if you look at the rest of the players on the Utah Jazz and what should be a pretty decent matchup against the Oklahoma City Thunder, SGA remains out. What else looks okay to you from the Jazz side of this game?
Horton Tucker looks okay. I'm not really sold on that one either. I wasn't last slate at 5,900. I'm certainly not today at 6,400. You're probably getting around 30 minutes from him. He's like a fantasy point per minute guy. 15% ownership, sure, he's got good positional eligibility, but I think there's like a weird obsession that DFS players have with Talen Horton Tucker, and it's been going on all season long. I don't really know why. I'm typically just not as enamored with him as the field. I'm not today either. Markkanen ceiling's nice, but he is 9,600. We actually haven't seen that much of a bump for him, or any bump really, without Jordan Clarkson this year, which is kind of surprising. But 10% ownership coming to him on DraftKings looks okay. I'm with you on FanDuel. That's a much, much better price tag. Kessler's up to 6,900. I don't know. This is a team that like should be appealing, but I think the pricing is pretty much where it should be, and it keeps them from, in my opinion, being very appealing at all, at least on DraftKings.
Yeah, nobody other. Chris Dunn's the only player projected for more than 15% ownership on DraftKings. FanDuel, where the prices are a little more reasonable, we do see more ownership going there. Chris Dunn is just insane to me. Lauri Markkanen being chalky at 8,600 on FanDuel, totally get it. And then THT projected for 34% ownership.
Yeah, and somebody in chat said Kelly O, like he's fine. He's getting 5% ownership. He's okay in tournaments. He is one of the only guys on this team that can add offensive production. Like the only players that have any sort of offensive game that are going to play any semblance of minutes are Markkanen, Horton Tucker, and Kelly Olynyk. So with you do get a path to a ceiling game from Olynyk, but I think the price tag's also just adjusted to where 5,900 is about where he should be priced.
And THT also kind of sucks. He's just okay as a fantasy producer. Like real life, he wasn't even in the Lakers rotation last year.
Right. Yeah, like he's not, and Utah's done everything they can this year to keep him out of the rotation. There've been so many games this year where like somebody gets hurt and the field is just like, 20% owned, $3,200 THT, and the Jazz are like, okay, we're gonna play Fontecchio instead.
Yeah, there was a slate where THT was like 30% owned, and then just didn't play because Fontecchio was in the rotation ahead of him. But yeah, it goes to what you said before, is that people have tried to roster THT a lot this year, and there haven't really been that many slates where it's kind of worked out. So we'll talk about the OKC side of the game in a second, but we did get a super chat here from Ace of Spade. He wants to know who my favorite options are for DK tiers. So I saw this question pop up, so I ran some DK tiers lineups, and Ace of Spade, these are the players that I got the most exposure to in different tiers. Tier 1, Jokic, pretty easy there. Tier 2, Markkanen, also pretty easy. Tier 3, Anthony Davis, also one that I consider to be fairly easy. We've got Domantas Sabonis in that tier as well. I tend to think De'Aaron Fox plays today because he practiced yesterday. If he's out, then Sabonis will be a little bit closer to AD, but right now it's AD. Tier 4, that is Brandon Ingram. Tier 5, this is where it's a little bit more spread out. I am right now going to go with Paul George. If Paul George ultimately ends up resting because everybody else is out for the Clippers today, I wouldn't be stunned by that. But if Paul George plays with everybody else out for this team, Paul George should set up to have a really big game against the Kings. And then tier 6, I like Terry Rozier with LaMelo Ball remaining out. So Ace of Spade, those are the favorite guys for me as of right now in tiers. But now, Adam, let's talk about the Oklahoma City Thunder. And I never know what to make of this rotation. It's a matchup against Utah that should be decent because Utah plays at a really fast pace and they've been bad on defense. But I don't know what to do with anybody's minutes on this team ever.
Yeah, I mean, it's OKC. So we do right now, this is an injury report to keep an eye on because we don't have Kenrich Williams. He's out for the year. But right now, Lindy Waters is listed as out with the G League. Ousmane Dieng is listed as out with the G League. So last game, we didn't have Kenrich Williams play, but we did have Lindy Waters play 18 minutes. If these guys aren't recalled, then you are down a body from last game. Now, in that game, Dario Saric only played 15. Trey Mann only played 9. So it's not like you would get any sort of condensed rotation, but it would, take a body potentially out of the rotation. But you can always feel relatively good about Josh Giddey. Obviously, we are only 2 games removed from him playing 19 minutes, but normally he's going to be up around 30. He played 34 last game. He's 7,900 playing without Gilgeous-Alexander. He's, perfectly fine, although I think pretty close to correctly priced at that price tag. You get a bump in usage for Lou Dort without SGA. He's 5,500. That looks fine. Jalen Williams is up to 6,800, small forward, power forward eligible. The price tag is just pretty quickly increasing on him, which makes him scary to get to. It is worth noting he's played 6 games now where SGA's been out and Giddey and Dort have been in. He does have a 24.5% usage rate and a 24% assist percentage in 32 minutes per game, 1.2 DraftKings points per minute. The ceiling is there for Jalen Williams. It's just a matter of the price tag getting up there as well. So I think Giddey, Dort, Williams are the guys that I would trust the most, but they are also pretty much correctly priced. You had Isaiah Joe go back to the bench last game, still play 29.5 minutes. There's some upside for him in tournaments, getting 9% ownership, 4,500 shooting guard, small forward. Certainly risky as hell, but there's some upside there. But Giddey, Dort, Jalen Williams, the wing, are the guys I would trust the most. I don't hate, in large field tournaments, taking some flyers on Isaiah Joe, Wiggins, Saric. Any of these guys can get there.
Just super fun to predict Giddey's minutes. Here's what it's been over the last handful of games: 34, 19, 32, 24, 38, 24, 32, 28. Just all over the place with Josh Giddey. And SGA is just going to be ruled out with various issues, it seems, for the rest of the year. They have him on the injury report with like 3 different things right now. They've got the abdominal stroke. So now it's abdominal strain and COVID protocols, but it was other stuff before. So we'll see how much he ultimately ends up playing down the stretch of the season. But let's move on to the Clippers and Kings. And from the Clippers side of the game, keep an eye out on this team's injury report as well. I wouldn't be shocked if we ultimately end up seeing Paul George ruled out as well, because as of now, we've got no Kawhi Leonard. Norman Powell was in a splint after the game on his arm, so he's doubtful to play today. I wouldn't be surprised if he's out for an extended period of time. Zubats and Marcus Morris, they're both questionable. They sat out last night. This team has yet to win a game since signing Russell Westbrook. But if everybody sits and like Russell Westbrook's out there by himself, I guess he'd be one of the top options on the slate in a matchup against the Kings. But what are your expectations for the Clippers, and how live is Paul George to rest, considering that Kawhi Leonard's already out and so many other players are on the injury report?
Yeah, I mean, nothing this team does tonight would surprise me. I really have no idea right now, like how to talk about them. If we just get a situation where like Kawhi is out and Kawhi's out, Powell's out, and everybody else is back, then Paul George looks good at 8,300. Westbrook looks fine at 7,100. They would both be expected to get a bump without Kawhi. Everything else would be pretty mediocre. Like, you just have a bunch of cheap pieces that you can mix and match in lineups between Batum, Morris, Gordon, maybe a 3K Bones Highland, picks up some minutes. But where it really gets interesting is, if this injury report comes out and you're getting multiple guys resting, because like you said, if they were to rest George and Westbrook's out there by himself, you've got a $7,100 triple double coming. So, he would look really good. Bones Highland at 3K would almost certainly be getting minutes in that situation. Eric Gordon would be a productive player in that situation at 3,700. Like, this team could end up being basically the Pacers from last night, depending on how injury news breaks.
And we got a super chat from Avi Schreier. He's saying that the big game that Chris Dunn had, he was only 2% on it. Avi said that he locked him that day. Well, if that's the case, good on you, because that's the one day.
Congratulations on your money.
Yeah, Chris, that's where the super chat money's coming from. It's via Chris Dunn. Maybe we should like him more than we've been giving credit for here. But thank you for the super chat, Avi, and good to know. Yeah, he was only 2% owned the day that he had that big night. So I don't really have anything else to say about the Clippers. There's so many players on the injury report. We need more information. So
Josh Los Angeles said Gordon could sit too. Yeah, absolutely could. I have no idea who is going to be active for this team tonight.
Yeah, keep an eye. I assume the 1:30 p.m. Eastern time injury report or the 5:30 p.m. Eastern time injury report are going to have a bunch of players ruled out for the Clippers. So be on the lookout for that, and then like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, watch Deep Dive, watch Live Before Lock later. We're going to have updates on the Clippers. The Kings side of the game, also, we need updates here because De'Aaron Fox is questionable. Now, with that said, this is a pretty important game for the Kings. It has implications for seeding, has implications for the division. De'Aaron Fox practiced yesterday. I think he's going to be good to go today. Is that how you feel as well? And then what would end up happening if he doesn't play?
Yeah, I'm guessing Fox plays, and if he does, I'm kind of not interested in this team. Obviously, Fox is fine. Sabonis is good, but there's so many good centers on this slate. If Fox is out, it doesn't necessarily change a ton. You would probably get Davion Mitchell starting at 3,500. He sucks on a point per minute basis, but he's 3,500 if you need a cheap, guard. It would open up more usage for guys like Herter and Barnes. Sabonis, when Fox is out, is always interesting to me because his ownership typically comes up, but his fantasy production doesn't change that much. There's more opportunities for him to do things, but the two-man game with him and Fox is so effective and such a big part of his production that the point per minute production doesn't change all that much without Fox on the floor. So if Fox is out, to me, it actually just makes the wing, like the peripheral players, look more appealing. Guys like Herter and Barnes.
Yeah, this is a late start time, but also we have a lot more late start time games than we usually have. Even on bigger slates, there's usually only a couple of them. We've got 3 10 p.m. Eastern time starts tonight and 1 10:30. So even if you guys have players who are in your lineups who are questionable for the late games, if somebody gets ruled out, you're going to have the flexibility to move stuff around. A lot of later games today, more than usual. So let's move on to the next one. We just need more information on that Kings Clippers game. But Memphis Grizzlies and the Denver Nuggets. For the Grizzlies, one thing of note here is that Dillon Brooks is one technical away from being suspended because he is an absolute moron and an idiot, and he wears absolutely stupid shit to basketball games, which I assume he picked up a technical foul for. That as well last game. But Dillon Brooks, who actually I believe has the second lowest true shooting percentage of any qualified player this year in the NBA. So Dillon Brooks, just any time I get a chance to slander him a little bit, I will do so. But when it comes to the pay-up options for the Grizzlies, John Morant remains kind of cheap. He is now at 10,300 over on DraftKings. FanDuel, we've got Morant at a 10,100 price point. I think Morant's going a little bit overlooked here, and he's a little bit underpriced. I like Morant quite a bit.
Is he playing with a broken face? Did I miss something?
John Morant?
He's listed on the injury report as available with a nasal fracture / face mask.
So I guess so.
Yeah, I missed it. But yeah, he looks good at 10-3. Obviously you get a nice ceiling from him. The problem with him is just that he doesn't typically play as many minutes as other guys in this 10K range. So, yeah, he's a really good point per minute guy. He gives you a high ceiling. Clearly, he's like 2 games removed from going for 70 something fantasy points. The ceiling's there. But you do get a pretty high opportunity cost, at that price point. But I do like getting to Ja. He's the only guy that I'm really interested in from Memphis. If you get to a little bit of Desmond Bane in tournaments, if you get to a little bit of $7,700 Jackson, that's fine. $4,200 Brooks. But again, to reiterate, I know I've said it a lot recently. Dillon Brooks, when Morant, Bane, and Jackson are in, is not the Dillon Brooks meme that just chucks up shots. He's like a 17, 18% usage guy. So the minutes should be there, but the usage isn't. You need him to actually be efficient on not many shots, which is not his game.
Yeah, I just searched the news and I didn't see anything on Morant. I'll look on Twitter. When you look up Morant, the only thing that comes about him potentially being suspended for punching the 17-year-old.
Yeah.
So that's the biggest John Morant news at the
threatening
moment.
A security guard, beating up a 17-year-old and pulling a gun on him. Yeah.
The thing that's crazy about the Grizzlies, this was a really likable young team not all that long ago. And now they're like the heel of the NBA. I find this is the least likable team in the league. And the Jaren Jackson thing is ridiculous to me, but there are a lot of people who are upset about that too. It was the big splits home road, but I know Zach Lowe looked into it and Kirk Goldsberry, and they said that there's a lot more defensive stats for Jaren Jackson Jr. at home than on the road this year. They went back and watched all the games. They said all of them were legitimate blocks and steals. But yeah, the rest, I hate Dillon Brooks. John Morant's become pretty unlikable with all of his issues off the court. So yeah, kind of fun team to root against. You and I both have futures bets on them, and now I just don't like this team.
They're still my favorite non-Washington team in the NBA. I like them. The more people start to dislike them, the more I like them.
But it's the reason why people dislike them. Like, I just can't stand Dillon Brooks, and then John Morant, it's like, oh, well, he's punching 17-year-olds and like gun charges.
Yeah, but so I don't mind Dillon Brooks. I think that people hate Dillon Brooks so much. I think he's a good defender, and when he plays into his role, he's good. So I don't mind liking him. I love having a team that just pulls guns on opponents and shines lasers on them while they're waiting for their bus. I still love Memphis.
Yeah, and Boss Bro brings up a good point. A lot of 17-year-olds need to be punched in the face. Fair. Yeah, fair. I don't think that's unreasonable.
That whole situation was weird too. It was a pickup game at Morant's house, so clearly he knew the guy.
Yeah, I also wonder. So it's somebody who's friend. Also, why is he friends with 17-year-olds? Is a friend?
He's only 23, 24.
That's still weird though.
But like, so that's like, but like if it a lot of these guys are so ingrained in like AAU, like in hoops and stuff, like it's not weird for them to like have basketball relationships with younger guys. I have no idea, like, who the guy was. He was somebody's younger brother or what, but like clearly he knew him. He was at his house.
Yeah. Well, either way, Memphis Grizzlies on the road against the Denver Nuggets. I don't like Memphis, but Nikola Jokic, generally somebody I like to look at for DFS purposes because he almost always projects as the highest player on any given slate for me relative to everybody else. The problem with today, though, is there's a lot of center options. Nikola Jokic, it's always hard, particularly on FanDuel, who only roster one center. Considering the price point of Jokic, I haven't been playing him as much as of late as I normally would. And then the other thing, too, is Jamal Murray's healthy and playing better. We've got Aaron Gordon back in the picture. Now, Michael Porter Jr. has played better in the second half. I don't really think I'm going to be getting to a ton of the Denver Nuggets tonight.
No, me neither. Jokic obviously great if you can get there, cool. But you do have very high opportunity cost at center tonight. Still pulling 15% ownership for Jokic. Beyond that, there's not much. Jamal Murray's price tags come down a little bit to 7,800. He certainly gives you a nice ceiling. Porter's relatively inexpensive at 5,500. Third option at best offensively, so it's not like you can really trust him, but you will get the big games here and there. But yeah, not a team where much stands out.
Yeah, so let's just move on. Kinkar is questionable play. That's not really going to have any kind of impact. And there's other spots where there is more applicable injury news. But the New Orleans Pelicans, they are one of those teams. Jonas Valanciunas is doubtful to play today. Larry Nance is out. Jose Alvarado's out. Zion Williamson remains out. We have Willy Hernangomez projected for a whole bunch of ownership today. He started in the last game for New Orleans in the absence of all those players. He is $4,600 on FanDuel and projected for 55% ownership. And then if you look at him over on DraftKings, Hernangomez 4,300 projected for 27% ownership. How high of a priority is Hernangomez going to be for you, assuming he starts?
Assuming he starts, very high. Because if he starts, that means he's not DNPing, which is good. And obviously he's a very, very good point per minute guy. We have him right now projected for 27% ownership, 4,300. He's just going to look like a really good play, assuming that he is in the starting lineup. Played 21 minutes last game. Jackson Hayes played 16. They closed with a small lineup, which you certainly could see happen again here. But even if you expect around 20 minutes from Hernangomez, he's going to look like a good play.
Yeah, and any fear for you that he doesn't start and that it could be Jackson Hayes starting?
It wouldn't surprise me at all if Jackson Hayes starts. 3,800 power forward eligible Jackson Hayes, if he starts, is I think a good value as well.
The other thing I'll say about it, because I do think there's a chance Hayes starts just because of the matchup against the Warriors and it being a little bit of a smaller team. Here's the good news. If you start with Willy Hernangomez, Hayes is cheaper and he has more position eligibility. It's a lot easier to go from Hernangomez to Hayes than it is to go from Hayes to Hernangomez. So just something to keep in mind as you guys build your lineups. And then on the pay up side, Brandon Ingram, CJ McCollum, they've been seeing extra usage as of late. We do have McCollum banged up dealing with a thumb injury. And that's also part of the reason that Ingram individually has had massive usage. But has the price point caught up to Ingram to the point where he's not as strong of an option now?
I think he's still a pretty strong option. No Joval, no Zion, plenty of usage to go around. Small forward eligible, so that's nice. Pulling 20% ownership, 14% chance of being optimal. I still don't really have any issues with Ingram at 8,600. He also played 38 minutes last game, so we've seen that playing time ramp up a little bit. I still like getting there. I think McCollum looks fine. He's low owned, but makes him kind of interesting in tournaments at 7,800. And then these wings, if you do think that they're going to close small, which I think there's a good chance that they will, you have Najee Marshall at 3,400. You have Herb Jones at 4,100. Trey Murphy coming in at 4K. In that last game, you got 28 minutes from Jones, which at 4,100 is fine, but he could certainly play more here. Trey Murphy off the bench played 32. Najee played 27. If you get that same closing lineup that you did last game, these guys all look good. Now, Josh Richardson didn't close last game, but and he certainly could today. Like, I think there's a good chance that he would. He's 5,100. He's somebody you could take a shot on as well. But I think there's a good chance that you're getting a closing lineup of McCollum, Ingram, and then 3 out of 4 of Marshall, Murphy, Richardson, and Jones.
Yeah, and we've got the other side of the game to talk about the Warriors, and just one final game left. But I want to remind you guys that don't forget that if you are signing up at Stokastic for the first time, use the link that we have below because it is going to get you 50% off the first package you sign up for if you've never signed up here before. And we've got so many tools now behind the paywall for players of all different levels. And our new NBA lineup generator, where if you guys have not checked this out yet, you could get access to it for less than $5 with a 50% off coupon that we have below. And this is something that if you're somebody who, you don't have time to watch all our shows, you don't have time to look at projections and build out lineups, the lineup generator is just going to do it for you based on all the different tools and the simulations we have over at stokastic.com. You could delete lineups you don't like, save lineups you do like. If you want to tinker with them, you could swap players out for other players, and we give you all of our projections and who projects the best to swap to. So we've been featuring that tool a little bit more as of late. So if you guys want to get access to that for less than $5, sign up using the link we have below. This is the best way, in my opinion, for newer DFS players to get started in the industry and in DFS is with our NBA lineup generator. And once again, click on the link below, 50% off the first package you sign up for. Let's talk about the Golden State Warriors, Adam. And Steph Curry remains out. This looks like the last time he's going to miss a game. It seems like he's due back over the weekend. But in the interim, this is a tail end of a back-to-back for the Warriors, but it was a blowout yesterday because they played the Clippers. Clippers never win games with Russell Westbrook anymore. So with that in mind, I don't think anybody should be that exhausted. Klay Thompson plays on the tail end of back-to-backs now. What is standing out to you about Golden State?
Not too much. Like, you get some value with Looney at 5K, but like that could certainly just disappear. One thing that is interesting to me is that Looney's getting 10.5% ownership right now. We talked about Mitchell Robinson and Robert Williams at the same price point, not getting any. I'd rather just get some of them. I don't think they're very different from Looney, but like if you get Zubats ruled out, Plumlee's in this price range as well, and he's going to look good. So Looney's fine. DiVincenzo, shooting guard, small forward. The minute should be there for him. The production, is anybody's guess. Then you get to the main pieces with Draymond, Poole, Thompson. Like, you get a high ceiling from all of them, but they are correctly priced as well. Poole is going to go out there and chuck, probably miss a lot, but he's going to chuck. Klay Thompson, maybe you'll set, another like 5-year high in rebounding, but unlikely. Shooting guard, small forward, he has a high ceiling, but I think he's just correctly priced. So it's a team that, again, I think there's guys you can play, but nobody that stands out as like a great value.
Yeah. And once again, when Steph Curry comes back, that's going to change a lot. So you could still, like, Jordan Poole, I think, looks better on FanDuel than he does on DraftKings. But also, these players are pretty appropriately priced for the absence of Steph Curry at this point. And everybody's going to be way overpriced when Curry comes back over the weekend. But one final game to talk about: Minnesota Timberwolves on the road against the Los Angeles Lakers. For Minnesota, Mike Conley hasn't really gotten going from a fantasy standpoint for this team, but the absence of D'Angelo Russell from Minnesota and Mike Conley being in the starting lineup instead, it's opened up more usage for players, particularly Anthony Edwards. So we've seen Edwards see a bit of a price increase now, and he's also less popular than what he was, because we saw him, around 8,000 when Russell was first out and was super, super popular. Now, though, Edwards is $9,400 over on DraftKings. FanDuel Edwards also $9,400. How do you like him as a pay-up option? And is there anybody else you're looking to get to from Minnesota?
Yeah, I think Edwards is fine. Like, you're getting a nice ceiling from him, but I do think the price tag is pretty much where it should be. We have him pulling 7% ownership, 8% chance of being optimal, shooting guard, small forward. No real takes there. Like, that's just looks pretty much correct. You have reasonable price tags on Conley and Anderson, but on a 10-game slate, they're not really going to stand out. The one spot that I think is interesting to me, and the price tag has come up a bit, but Rudy Gobert at 7,400, only pulling 1% ownership. He, I think, is going to be better going forward with Mike Conley than he was with D'Angelo Russell. He has history with Mike Conley. Mike Conley knows how to involve him offensively. D'Angelo Russell did not, and from reports when he left, actively did not want to. So we have 5 games so far this year where Gobert has played with Mike Conley. In those games, he's averaged 1.18 DraftKings points per minute. He's got an 18.5% usage rate. In the 45 games he played with Russell, 1.09 DraftKings points per minute, 16% usage rate. I do think, again, that the price tag sort of beat us to the punch. Like, you're not getting that $6,500 Gobert anymore, but I think you're going to see more ceiling games out of Gobert now that Conley's there. I'm just not sure how actionable it is on this slate because there's so many good center options. It's not like I'm advocating for just jamming in a bunch of $7,400 Gobert, but I do think you see more ceiling games from him going forward than you have to this point this season.
So now let's talk about the Lakers, who they're going to be getting Anthony Davis back. AD sat last game. We still have D'Angelo Russell out. We still have LeBron James out. LeBron, depending how these next handful of games go for the Lakers, I'm still kind of skeptical whether he ends up returning and playing at all for this team this year. But one of the reasons that when we were talking about Nikola Jokic before and why he's not somebody I really think I'm going to be getting to a lot as a payout option is because if I'm paying up for one center today, to me, it's Anthony Davis in the absence of LeBron James. I like the price discount we're getting on him relative to Jokic. And I still think that Davis not quite priced appropriately for the absence of LeBron. So how do you view him as a payout option?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. He looks great. And this is one reason why a lot of the centers we've talked about haven't been getting that much ownership. You have a bunch going to Hernan Gomez, you have a bunch going to Davis, and then you're just spreading out the rest to a bunch of guys that look pretty similar. But I'm with you as far as really wanting to pay up for Davis here. 10-2 is a very fair price tag. It helps make up for the opportunity cost that he's probably $1,000 too cheap. Matchup is fine. He's about a fantasy point and a half per minute guy without LeBron or Westbrook on the floor this year. He's played a total of 10 games without LeBron this year, 1.73 DraftKings points per minute and 33 and a half minutes per game. Again, I expect that point per minute production to come down over a larger sample, but he's been great without LeBron overall. He's been very good without him on the floor. I love getting to Davis here. Malik Beasley, Dennis Schroeder, these guys both look fine at their price tags as well. Prices have come up a little bit, but this is sort of like Utah, where you take out LeBron, you take out Russell, so you're opening this massive void of guys that create and provide offense. And there's not that many guys on the Lakers that can fill it. Anthony Davis obviously is going to take on a huge role. Beasley can, Schroeder can. But like Jared Vanderbilt, we've seen him be a very popular play recently. I still think he's a perfectly fine play because the minutes should be there, but he's not somebody that has an offensive game. He can't step up and fill in anything that's being left open. Reeves isn't a great offensive player. Brown isn't. So you need Beasley to step up and do more. You need Schroeder to step up and do more. Potentially Rui, potentially Lonnie Walker. Like, these are guys that can step into a bigger role as well. Love Anthony Davis. I like Beasley. I like Schroeder. I don't mind in large field tournaments taking some shots on, say, Rui or Lonnie Walker, and just hoping that they get hot.
Yeah. And then the other thing too, when it comes to Anthony Davis, at least relative to DraftKings and FanDuel, is DraftKings, he's underpriced. FanDuel, he's more appropriately priced at 11.5, but AD is power forward eligibility on FanDuel, which just makes him easier to get to than it does on DraftKings, where only has the eligibility at the center. So extra price point on FanDuel, but offset by the additional power forward eligibility. Any of the other role players that we should be keeping an eye on from the Lakers?
I forgot to mention Reeves, but you can throw him into that mix with like Rui and Walker, where like I feel better about Reeves playing time, but he's not a particularly high usage guy, but he can step into a little bit bigger role offensively.
And that is going to do it for us today. If you guys haven't done yet, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. And once again, shout out to PrizePicks, the sponsor of our show. If you guys haven't signed up there, use the link below to sign up. You get 1 free month of Stokastic Plus Platinum when you sign up using our link. That's going to do it for us today, guys. Watch all the rest of our content today. Good luck tonight. Hope to see you later.